Hey, it's Kelsey, your best friend on the homestead from roughandtumblefarmhouse.com, and today we're going to be talking about how to make your own homemade Greek yogurt. It's super simple, just 2 ingredients. You don't need any sort of fancy equipment, no instant pots, no crock pots even, no yogurt maker, just some basic things you probably already have in your house. So I have another recipe here on YouTube for how to make your own raw milk yogurt, and I will link to that below in the description box if you want something that's a raw milk option. This is not raw because you are heating it to a temperature where it's becoming pasteurized, and then you're adding in those yogurt cultures. So I will link to that video. It's pretty popular, has a lot of views. People sometimes have a little trouble with that recipe. I'm not sure why. It always works just fine for me, but this is another one that I have found to be foolproof. It works every single time I've done it, and I really, really like how this recipe turns out. So I'm going to take you through it now. So the first thing you're going to need is a nice stock pot. I make this a gallon at a time. When you use a gallon of milk, and it can be raw or store-bought, totally up to you. When you make a gallon of it, or start with a gallon of milk, you're going to end up with about a half gallon of Greek yogurt in the end. So we're going to start with our stock pot, and we're going to add the milk to it. When I use my raw milk, I do skim the cream off first to use for other things. It's entirely up to you if you want it to be whole milk or not. This is probably like a 2% sort of milk, I would say. And put it in your pot, and you want a nice thick bottom pot. Otherwise, there's a higher chance that your milk is going to scorch. And we're going to heat that milk up to 185 degrees. So I have the temperature kind of like medium high somewhere in there, and then I am right there with it pretty much the entire time, using a whisk to keep it from scorching on the bottom. Otherwise, you'll probably have some scorching problems. Now, once your milk has reached 185 degrees, you are going to want to cool it back down. So the 185 is to kill any sort of things that are going on in the milk, any sort of other bacteria. So it's 100% pasteurizing it because we don't want it to compete with our yogurt culture that we're going to be adding in. So then after you hit 185, you're going to put some cool water in your sink, fill it up to where it'll be on the pot, about 3/4 of the way up. You don't want it to overflow. So fill your sink up with cool water, and then put that milk in there in the pot and let the temperature come down to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So kind of keep an eye on it, stir it a little bit with your whisk. It usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes for it to come down to that temperature. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on it, and as you stir it, that'll help it kind of cool more as you're sort of exposing that milk to the cooler sides of your pot as it's starting to cool down. So once it has cooled down, take it back out and just set it on your countertop. And we're going to take 1 cup of that milk and add it to a 1/4 cup of your starter culture. Now, your starter culture is any sort of plain Greek style yogurt you want to use. Now, I've had success with the organic plain yogurt from Aldi. I've had good success with the organic plain yogurt from Costco. And once you have used a starter culture, yogurt culture you just buy from the store, then you're just going to be able to use your own cultures from your yogurt batch after batch. But to get started here, you do have to buy a yogurt from the store. I haven't used other brands just because that's where we tend to shop, but you're welcome to try other things. Just make sure that it is plain, nothing with flavors in it, and I tend to like to use an organic option personally. So you just need about 1/4 of a cup and 1 cup of the milk that's cooled to 125, and kind of stir those together until it's completely smooth. So you have almost kind of like a buttermilk consistency. It's a little bit thick. You're going to pour that into your main pot and then whisk that around so it gets really well exposed in there. Now put a lid on top of your pot, and we're going to preheat our oven or warm our oven to its lowest warm settings. The lowest mine goes is 145 degrees. And so I let it get to that. And mine, for whatever reason, my oven, if I'm heating it to like a regular heat temperature, it will beep when it comes to temperature. It doesn't do that when I'm just warming it. So I set it to the lowest warm temperature and then just let it sit for about 5 minutes, because that should be enough to get it up to that 145, I think anyway. And then at that point, you can switch the oven off and take your pot that has your cultured milk in it, cover it with the lid, and then kind of wrap it in a towel, tuck it in the oven, switch on the light, and then wait. So now you're in the incubation period. So the thing I really like about this recipe is a lot of the recipes say they take hours or you have to do it overnight. This one's done in 4 hours. It's really quick. It works really well. This recipe actually comes from, I think her name is pronounced Gianniclis, I'm not positive, Caldwell, one of her cookbooks. I'll show it here. It's a wonderful cheese making book I recommend to any beginner. And yeah, for her, just 4 hours is what she says, and I've had it turn out great in 4 hours every time. If yours is not thick yet, like it still looks like it's getting thick, just leave it in there a little bit longer. Maybe your house is colder depending on the time of year. So at that point, pull it out of the oven, and then we are going to strain it. So what I do is I set up a bowl, and then I have sort of a, not even sure what the word for this is, but you see kind of this like mesh strainer type thing that I lay across the top, and then I put a colander on top of that and then line that with a cheesecloth. And I just use clothespins to pin it into place, and then we're going to dump out that yogurt into the colander. And so this allows all the whey to go through into a pot that you collect. You can do whatever you want with that whey. We can talk about that in a second. And then you want to just let it sit for a little bit. Now, this does thicken up a lot in the fridge, so I tend to only let mine sit for maybe 5 minutes, and then I'm going to scoop it out into jars. It's up to you how thick you want it. You might have to try a couple batches until you get that thickness just right. But like I said, if you get it as thick as you want it to look in the end, you're going to end up with more of like a cream cheese consistency once it has chilled in the fridge. So get it to where it's just a little bit runnier than you'd like it to be, and then that's the time you want to take it out. So I just scoop this out into jars. I like to use a canning funnel. It makes it a lot easier. And I like to use quart jars because I then like to mix this to get it really smooth and creamy with a whisk. And you can certainly do this in the blender, but if I can avoid doing extra dishes, I'm going to choose the route that involves less dishes. So I just keep my canning funnel in there, and then that way I can mix it really easily. Nothing's going to come over the edge. It works really slick. So I just keep my canning funnel on, whisk the snot out of it till it's nice and smooth. And then that's it. I'm going to put a cap on it and keep it in the fridge. This will keep for up to a couple weeks. The longer you have it in the fridge, the tangier the flavor is going to be. And other than that, that's pretty much it. That's how you make it. With that whey, like I said, if you want, I just use it to ferment my chicken feed. I'll go pour it, or if I have, especially the pelletized stuff I don't like, I'll put that in a bucket and put their feed, put the pellets in there, pour the whey in, let it kind of soak and make almost like a cereal sort of thing for them, like a mash. You can also use it for baking if you want to, or you can also dilute it by about half. Mix in, if you've got, a half gallon of whey, add a half gallon of water, and then I use that to water some of my outdoor plants. It's a nice little fertilizer boost. There's lots of stuff you can do with that whey, so don't just dump it down the sink. So the only other thing I can think of that might be like a troubleshooting thing is if you don't like the flavor of your yogurt, maybe try a different starter yogurt culture. Or if it's like not tangy enough for your taste, then another option is you can leave it to sit for longer before you take it out and strain it. It's going to get a much stronger flavor. I had one the other day that I, just because of circumstance, I ended up leaving it in there for closer to 7 hours. And then once I strained it out, it was really good for pancakes, but in terms of eating as just like a straight yogurt, it was really strong. So just keep that in mind. The longer it sits, the stronger the flavor is going to be. So you definitely want to pull it right around that 4-hour mark. So that's it. Again, super easy. And also one thing just kind of to note in the video, you'll probably notice that I have blue fingernails, a little bit blue. I am not a nail polish girl, but my 4-year-old is very much a nail polish girl. So that's just the remnants of her wanting to do a nail salon with me. So just wanted to make a note of that. If you're like, what is going on with that lady's nails? It's my daughter. So anyway, if you have any questions, make sure you let me know below. I will link up here to my raw milk yogurt recipe, and I'll link to some other videos I have that you might want to try if you're interested in making some of your own homemade dairy products. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week here at our Rough and Tumble farmhouse.